Hello and welcome to the Dunamis EQ podcast. My name is Tolu, I'm your host for today, and I have the privilege of being joined by a good friend of mine, Matt.
Tolu, thank you for having me, my friend. I'm excited to be here.
It's an honor and always a pleasure, always a pleasure. So Matt and I go quite a few years back, I'm not sure exactly how many, but we used to train basketball in St. Albans on at least a Friday morning, sometimes a Monday, sometimes a Wednesday. But yeah, we used to go at like 7 in the morning and run around a basketball court like absolute lunatics and shout at each other, encourage each other. It was a very, very good time. And some of the times that I really enjoyed the most were when we actually just got to talk about life, like what are you trying to do? What are we trying to be? So talk to the listeners about who you are, what are you doing now, where do you want to go, and just talk a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so just the small details. Yeah, nothing major. I'm working in recruitment at the moment. I work for Activision at the moment, so all the games that people probably know, Call of Duty. My personal favorite is actually probably like Spyro and Crash. I used to
really.
Yeah, oh my god, I used to love those when I was a kid. Like be obsessed with them. Like we would, and it's not. I feel like we've gone off topic already. It's fine, but it's not like like back in the day. It's not like now where it's like you go online with people and you play, and obviously you kind of you're with your friends and you talk. It was like we would go to school, talk about like what levels we'd done that previous day.
Yeah.
Then I would like go home from like 4 till 7. I was on it. From 7 till 10, I'm back on it, and then the next day you're like, oh, I hope I've like got further than them. That was like the conversation. So a good little aside there, hopefully for everyone. But yeah, so
you've always been super competitive, then, basically, is what you're saying.
Basically, yeah. I honestly don't even know where it comes from, because I'm, it's normally I find kind of it's like the people with like siblings, right? That there's like this real competitiveness to them, and they've had to They want to be better at them than this. They want to be better than that. The classic one is Michael Jordan, obviously, like playing against his older brother, and that igniting that fire. But yeah, honestly, always I don't even maybe a need to prove myself. I think that was there probably for a long time. And kind of like, oh, I've got to do better than this, or I've got to do better than this. And but yeah, I've always enjoyed competition for whatever reason.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Do you want me? So yeah. So
you're saying about yourself.
That was what you actually asked me. I've been working in recruitment for about 5 years in a row, but then I've also had recruitment experience kind of at the beginning of my career. I did a lot of stuff for Tesco. So I was working on brand and attraction for graduates at the time. So, we had this graduate program. How do we get grads to want to come to Tesco, and how do we explain to them that it's not just working in the stores. There's a lot of stuff you can do, right? So we'd go into schools, go into universities, always feel very, very nervous about the thought of public speaking. But
really?
Yeah. Oh my God. Like I used to, it's almost worse, I think, when it's like some kids or younger people, and it's like,
they're brutal, mate.
Exactly. That's only because like if you're boring, they're just gonna not even like bother paying attention. They're like getting their phones out and whatever. So so it actually did help me kind of like really become a better public speaker. Not that I'm no expert at it, but yeah. So but once I got into it was kind of fine, and they asked questions and you got them engaged and all that type of stuff. And yeah, I think in terms of the relevant stuff of the journey to share, I've been posting a lot on LinkedIn, as you and I kind of talked about before this and off air. And it was really just, me, we've known each other for a while. Like I said, I wanted to do something where I am writing. Like I wrote back in the day. I've had, I used to have a little mini kind of freelance business. I had some clients there. I even had a freelance writer working for me at one point. I kind of built it up into a little bit of a very small business, admittedly. But I've always loved writing. Again, for whatever reason, I think it's just the process of like having these thoughts and then putting it down to paper or on a screen in this, nowadays, and having people read it, resonate with it, and be like, oh, I see myself in that, or oh, this is really helpful, or oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. So I realize now that I have all this recruitment knowledge that I've built up, and kind of from an insider's perspective, right? And LinkedIn obviously is a great audience for that. A lot of people on there are looking for jobs, even if they're currently in a job, they're still kind of open to it. But particularly now, there's like all these layoffs, like
it's crazy.
But yeah, the market is really mad at the moment, and like genuinely, I do feel for people who are really trying to get into, whether it's gaming, whether it's any industry. And so, the opportunity just sort of arose. Within Activision, they ran a personal branding workshop, which I thought was
really.
Yeah. So that kind of is what like helped to prompt this, because as I kind of said to you, I was looking for something to
an outlet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then this sort of opportunity just kind of presented itself. And at first I was like, well, to be honest, I don't love the idea of like only talking about like myself. That's what I thought personal branding.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like, am I a narcissist that I just want to talk about me all the time?
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if I'm sure, and I'm not sure who'd be particularly interested if I'm being completely honest. But they did it in such a good way where it was like, no, it's just simply like what you would be known for, right? Like your personal brand. Intentionally, what do I want to be known for? That's really it. And I was like, well, I have all this recruitment knowledge. I was like, I could just share that, like basically, and just who knows? I was like, if I can just help a few people, like improve their CV, like do better in interviews.
Yeah,
a role that they really want to get into gaming in particular. Obviously, people see the Activision thing and ask me about gaming. But honestly, there's really the same for getting into any industry.
It's very applicable, because even I was looking through some stuff and I was like, I could actually do that and it would make a difference. Or like when I look at CVs, I'm like, this is why I don't like that.
Yeah,
I'm like, right.
Yeah,
this is exactly it.
So that's great feedback, first of all, from someone again who is an actual a hiring manager, right? Who does look at CVs and does hire people. So that's some of the most valuable feedback I've gotten as well, is that people like you, hiring managers, have said to me, this is actually really useful, and it's kind of informing me why I'm looking at the CV and thinking,
what is this? I would love to send people who have applied to our jobs to your post and be like, look, here, this is what I can tell you.
Mate, I'll be flattered. I'll be flattered. I'll take it. But yeah, honestly, that and yeah, the feedback has been extraordinary. Honestly, like I didn't, obviously I sort of took off a little bit, and I got the kind of the few of the posts went viral, and sort of the follow-up going up and all that, and it's like a load of messages just kind of saying like, this is really insightful, this is really helpful, and then a lot of messages saying like, because of your hints and tips and all that on LinkedIn, I've gotten an interview.
That's amazing.
Gotten a promotion. I've gotten
That's amazing.
Oh yeah, exactly. The proof is in the pudding in that sense. Yeah. It's one thing to be like, I know all this stuff will be helpful, and another thing.
It's actually working.
Actually, like I know it will be, but there's like always that little bit where it's like, I really hope like people use it and actually it works. Otherwise, like what's the point, right? So, so yeah, I guess that's. And that's been a really cool thing of my journey. That's kind of a big focus of what I'm doing now, where I'm at, and yeah, it's been really cool.
So I think one of the things that I really enjoy about your post, right, is that for me it feels like, and this is no disrespect to any other recruiter, right, it feels a bit like you're a bit of a recruiter with a heart, right? Because I can feel you coming through and saying, look, this is what will be helpful, right? And what I've really admired is that you've gone through some quite controversial-ish topics, right? I'm like, I'm like looking at the comments, like, what are people going to say in the comments, right? But you've got this really nice way of engaging with that and doing a bit tongue-in-cheek. Like for me, there's a lot of emotional intelligence in terms of how you do your posts. So one of the things I wanted to understand from you is, what does emotional intelligence mean to you? And how do you try and weave that into what you do?
God, that's a good question. I absolutely love that question. So yeah, I suppose a lot of what I try to do with the posts is meet people where they're at, rather than saying you are, like, basically kind of saying like you're wrong, or like you are, not in a maybe direct way, but an indirect, like almost like you should be ashamed of like way you're doing things. Like shaming people into changing or doing things differently is never going to work. It might work on like a one-off basis if you just scream in someone's face and then they something different, but like it's not
sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable at all. So I really, really try my best to meet people where they're at, and I always have in mind, like, when I'm doing a post, I'm like, it basically, they're pretty much all based on real conversations I've had with either candidates or friends or my girlfriend. You know, it's any of those things where I'm like, how did this conversation actually go, rather than like, how do I think it should have gone? You know, like, the ideal situation is someone comes to you for help and you tell them exactly what to do, and then they do.
They do it? Yeah, happily.
Yeah, but it's like, realistically, like, that's not always going to happen. And sometimes you have to, you know, when people are venting, it isn't about, and you know this as well, it's not about, oh, let me solve your problem, but it's like, let me understand where you're at. I'm going to say, I hear you, right, I get it. I'm going to say, right, so just so I understand, this is what you're saying. So I try to come at the post from that angle of, like, basically empathy, and that's really kind of what emotional intelligence means, is, to me, is having empathy for somebody, is actually genuinely putting yourself in their shoes. I mean, what not what I, obviously it's always going to be like subjective to a point, but not what I think like they should think, but like, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, what are they actually, regardless of whether I agree or not as a recruiter or just a human being, regardless of whether I agree or not, what are they really thinking about this situation? Which is why, for example, I will say in some of my posts, you know, I think I've alluded to the fact before, like, the hiring process isn't perfect, or interviewers have unconscious bias. You sort of talked about these potentially controversial topics, and it's like, because I know they might be thinking about that sucks, or I hate that, and it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, I'm not telling you you're wrong.
No.
Is it, you know, is it the wisest point of view in the world? Maybe not. You know, that we can talk about, but it's like, ultimately, it's about like meeting people where they're at, and then basically kind of saying, I get where you're at. So they're sort of bought in already, right? Like, when they've kind of read the post, they're sort of bought in, and then it's like, and in my expertise, in my view, I've spoken to a million candidates, loads of hiring managers, I've seen a million CVs, whatever. This is like what I think would be helpful. And I'm really trying to be genuine in that. It's not, hopefully, because I don't even really like talk about Activision that much. It's not like, oh, isn't Activision so great? It's like, it's just self-serving. Like, why would I, like, it's like, you know, what's the, and I think then you lose credibility. So yeah,
because you're not trying to sell anything. This is what I love about your posts, is that you're not actually trying to sell anything. And that's where I think that sometimes it's even harder, because it's like, I'm not even trying to sell you anything, and you're coming at me real hard. Like, why are you coming at me so hard? I'm literally here to try and help. Like,
it's like,
what?
You know, that was it. And that was like really the, you know, I said, you know, this personal branding thing I did, and then it was like, I genuinely was like, oh my God, I could really help here. And that's it. That's all. That's genuinely all I was trying to do. And, you know, obviously it's cool that people engage with it and comment on it and like it and follow me and think I'm worth following and think I share good insights and all that. But yeah, really it came from a place of simply wanted to help, and yeah, the emotional intelligence point of view, empathy, meeting them where they're at, putting yourself in their shoes, being as objective as possible. You're always going to have some subjectivity, and then writing based on that, rather than just like, you're wrong for thinking this. This is what you know, and it's like, I just don't think that works.
And I think, like, we live in a diverse world, and diversity is so important that actually you think differently to how I think, you know. And what I like about, you know, if you can do that with emotional intelligence, is that you open space for diversity. You're not shutting down other points of views. You can actually be open, and you can maybe learn some things from other people and say, oh, okay, I didn't see it that way, but maybe I can incorporate that.
So true. And that's such a good point. Like, for example, on one of my posts, you know, it's interesting because the more viral a post goes, the more likely you are, first of all, to get someone comment like, you're an idiot, basically. Just, you know, unfortunately, that just is what it is. But you're also, you know, there's also a good chance that somebody might have an intelligent comment about a slightly different point of view, or like, actually, hey, have you considered this? So on one of my posts, for example, I think it was a post about, like, you know, it was like, the best candidates I've ever interviewed have done the following, and I kind of did a whole things which they did, and someone on the post said, not all of these are accessible to neurodiverse.
I saw that.
Yeah, right. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I was like, At first, so I'll be as truthful as I can. At first, I felt defensive. I was like, "Hey, like, how dare you? Like, I'm obviously I'm right." Like, but then thankfully, I've got to a place where I'm like, I don't always have to, react or listen to that sort of first initial feeling, and I'm like, okay, like you feel like that, it's fine. In 5 minutes you won't. So let's just be let's just try and be objective here. And so I went back to the person and I was like, that's really interesting. Could you tell me a bit more about that? And then actually, it started off a
really good conversation.
Really, good conversation, healthy. I was like, please let this just go.
Good one.
Come in and be like, like start talking about whatever and just offending people left and right. But yeah, it started a really interesting conversation, and then off the back of that, I messaged the person kind of privately, and I was like, hey, I just wanted to say like thanks so much for kind of opening my eyes a little bit and opening my perspective, because that's the other thing, about the emotional intelligence, as you've just alluded to. Like, I don't have all the answers. I'm not, I'm not everything, or maybe anything. I'm closer to being right about nothing than I am everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
Like that's really a good way to look at it, I think. And yeah, so I think it's about being open to new perspectives. Even if you eventually, and in this case, I was like, oh, I can incorporate some of that, and actually in some more of my posts or some more kind of posts that I've got coming out, I've tried to incorporate more of that. While I'm not an expert, but I've tried to incorporate more of like, how can I be more inclusive to like neurodiverse candidates, for example. So yeah, I think, and yeah, but then also sometimes you might end up thinking, you know what, I heard their point of view, I get it, I respect it, I just don't agree. Like, and again, that's
perfectly okay. That's perfectly fine.
Exactly. Like, if you looked on social media, you'd think it's not okay, because everyone's like, it's so like, can be so divisive. Like, there's just no conversation, there's no discourse, there's no dialogue. It's just simply like, you're wrong and I'm right. And it's like, but you're saying that as strongly as you feel about this thing, that's how this person feels about this thing. And it's like, even if you can you don't have to agree, but even if you can just understand at least that, it's like, so it's not going to work me saying like, you should think like this. It's like, if anything, they're just going to dig in more in the first place. And then, why are you like the moral authority on whatever it is, right? So yeah, you make a really good point there as well about being open and about potentially, learning something new.
I think what you said about understanding their point of view, because you can understand something and disagree with it. Like,
yes,
I think it's so important to at least understand, because for me, it's not just what do you think, it's also why do you think it? Because you might have been through experiences that I've never been through, but in me hearing your experiences, I can understand a totally different perspective. And I think that understanding point that you made is so key.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think you're exactly right. It is the understanding, and it's like, oftentimes I think in conversations where we are disagreeing, I don't think enough we say like, okay, so let me try and understand what you're saying. Is this what you're saying? And then basically just doing like kind of a summary almost of what they're saying. And then it's like they can say yes or no or whatever it is. And, it's good. That's actually a really good kind of practice in recruitment, because you're listening to candidates all the time, and listen to hiring managers all the time. And so I'll often go back and say, okay, cool, thanks for that. So just to be clear, this is what you're saying. Like, in a hiring manager, so just to be clear, this is what you're looking for. In a candidate, I'll be like, so just to be clear, this is kind of what you've got experience in. That, yeah, everyone's probably heard the quote, like, like most people listen to reply rather than understand. And it's like, actually, I think recruitment really gives you that space. I'm not saying, not all recruiters are perfect, as you well know, but it in theory gives you the space to listen, to understand somebody, rather than to just simply kind of, oh, actually, I just want to get my point of view off now, and then actually as well, it makes people feel heard. That's a big part of intelligence, being like, feeling like you're heard. Realistically, I don't think who was it? I was listening to a podcast recently. I think it was Robert Greene. He's an author, if you've heard of him. So he wrote 48 Laws of Power. He wrote Mastery.
He was on Stephen Bartlett.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. When my girlfriend told me he was on there, I was like, what? I was like, I need to immediately.
Epic podcast.
Oh my god, podcast. So good. And I think one of the things he said was like, how often like do we want to be heard, but maybe we don't really feel. How often do you really feel that way? It's actually not as often as you'd probably.
It's quite rare now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really good part of emotional intelligence as well.
So you mentioned something earlier. You said now you've gotten to this point, right, about the journey with being able to respond and things like that. how did you kind of start on the journey of emotional intelligence? Like, was there an experience that you had that sparked you, like, okay, I need to learn more about this, or was it something that you grew up with? Like, how did you start that journey?
Yeah, man, you ask good questions. You should host a podcast. So honestly, it was like it's been kind of a bit of an all over the place journey for me. I think
Okay.
put it this way, I was very interested in emotional intelligence from a very young age. Probably
Oh,
like
really?
probably like my teenage years, I would say, is
Wow.
when I sort of really first, like, I honestly can't even remember exactly. I think it was actually when I studied sports psychology, and I found the like
Right.
psychology part of it more interesting than the kind of
Yes.
sports part of it. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, never had been introduced to any concepts like this before. I think this is when I was like 16, 17, and
Yeah.
that sort of led me down a particular path. And actually, really interestingly, it was like my mum and dad said, even when I was like really young, like 3 or 4 years old, I would really often, and when you're a kid you can get away with it, but I would just really
Yeah.
often like sort of just watch people, just to like, just because I'd be
Really?
what's what's going on, like what they think,
Yeah.
why are they doing what they're doing. Like I would just
Yeah.
be so curious about people, and you know, you can't do it at this age because people think you're
No, I think you're weird.
yeah, exactly. When you're a kid, it's like, oh, isn't that really cute? But I even remember it then, like looking, even like being in shocks, like why are people choosing this thing, or why are people choosing that
Wow.
one? So anyway, but honestly, like probably a really pivotal moment was like in my um romantic relationships. So
Okay.
they'd always been pretty much always been like fairly unhealthy, to be honest with you. Like, you know,
Okay.
bordering on toxic in some of the cases. Like it was bad. You don't even need to know the details, because if you've ever been in one, you'll know exactly what I mean. But basically,
Yeah.
it it was got to a point where I kept repeating the same kind of pattern, the same kind of
Okay.
relationship, and I was aware of that, at least, that I was repeating the pattern, but
Yes.
I was like, but how do I stop
How
it?
do I get out? Yeah.
Yeah, because that's then the next stage, and I just, you know, it was basically, I was like, I don't know. So at that
Yeah.
point, and I get that therapy is not accessible to everybody. Hopefully that changes at some
That
point, right?
changes. Yeah.
Cost to it, but I went to therapy. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna see a therapist, because this is something. There was maybe other stuff that I wanted to, you know, get into and talk about,
Okay.
but like, this is the main thing that I can't seem to like get out of the pattern.
Sorry, how old were you when you went to therapy?
So this was recently. So this was
Okay.
so I was 31 when I first went to therapy. So
Okay.
only took me about 15 years to, which is not bad. But yeah, so and kind of, you know, before all of that, just to give a brief bit of context, I'd read all the books, a million
Yeah.
books. You know, there was this book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, which was a really, really interesting read about kind of
That
how
sounds fascinating.
it's so good, honestly. And it was good as well, because I read the first like 2 pages and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, you just described me. Like
Wow.
this is going to be a good book. But basically, it's about obviously it's a bit of a provocative title, but it's
Very
essentially
provocative.
it's really good. But it's essentially about, like, you know, going into relationships and sacrificing yourself, not having any boundaries, and it
Yeah.
applies to men and women. Like, but
Yeah.
he just wrote it for you know, an audience of men, but it would help really anyone who kind of has an issue in relationships where they,
Yeah.
you know, you're a people pleaser, right? That's kind of
Yes.
a term now, and you know, you don't seem to have any boundaries, and your personality seems to just subsume into, you know, the other person, and then you're,
Yeah.
you know, and
You're
then
almost lost.
unhappy, lost. Yeah, you're completely lost, and you're unhappy, and it
Yeah.
sucks. You end up resenting them and resenting yourself, and
Yeah.
but yeah. So I was 31 when it was actually when I just got when I got the job at, well, I was at King at the time, but it's sort of Activision, King as a company, because yeah, it was finally at a point where I was like, well, I can actually afford, first of all, a good therapist now, so that helps. And it was honestly like a, you know, even just the decision to go to therapy, I was, you know, I did feel proud of that, because nobody was making me, nobody was
Yeah.
just off like, hey, I'm gonna go and do this because I really want to sort this out. I really want to figure this out. It's causing me a lot of pain, and I'm not willing to tolerate that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I want to sort it out. So yeah. And anyway, kind of, you know, getting to the point of like, it really helped me like take a step back from like my thoughts and my feelings. Like those are things that we are aware of. You're aware you have thoughts, you're aware you have feelings, but how we get lost in them so often. We get lost in our thoughts, and we get, you know, every single feeling we have, we like respond to. We feel like we have to either like get rid of it, or we feel like we have to like maybe express it outwardly in a very destructive way, you know, and these thoughts kind of come into your head and you're like, oh my God, like this thing. And then it's like, oh, you know, and it's just
all
like,
over the place.
Yeah, it's just a mess. It can just be a mess in there. And it's like, it just helped me get distance from that. And I was like, you know what, I can be aware of things without acting on them. And that and it sounds very simple because it is, but it's really hard to do.
Very profound.
Yeah, right. It's very hard to do, and yeah. So in terms of the healthy relationship stuff, it really made me look at kind of like, you know, when they even just like when I'm speaking with a woman who I'm attracted to, for example, like what thoughts and feelings am I having? Like really be aware of that, really focus on that, and a lot of it did come down to people pleasing. Like it was really that simple, and I was like, I'm basically trying to get them to like me. Rather than even thinking about, do I like them? Like, do I even want to spend time with them? Or is it just that, you know, people pleasing was if I got someone to like me, I'd won. Like that was my, you know, thinking at the time. And yeah, therapy helped massively with that, you know, and I really just, you know, it's still, like I said, when I felt defensive. So it's like, it doesn't mean you're never going to have like a quote unquote negative feeling again, or like thoughts that you don't like again, but now I've just got a distance from it where it's almost like, you know, I just don't have to act on it. You know, just don't have to. It's as simple as that. And then you're the one that's in control rather than these kind of, you know, your thoughts and your feelings.
100%. It's that thing of like, how can I positively process this?
Yes.
Right? Because like, you're right, things are going to happen. You're going to be like, well, that was really crap. Like, but what do I do about it?
Awful. That made me feel really sad. That made me feel really angry. Like you're just, you know, you're a human being. You're going to have them. But as you said, how do you positively process those rather than like, you know, just trying to, oh my God, I don't want to feel that. Let's just like suppress it down. You know, it's suppression doesn't work. You know, it's like holding you know, it's like holding a balloon underwater. Like eventually.
It's gonna come up.
You just, you know, you can hold it down there for as long as it's gonna come up eventually. So, and probably not in a good way because now it's just out of control and it's going everywhere. And we've all done that, I'm sure. At some point, you know, you respond and it's like, you know, there's even that quote around anger. I think it was sort of from Eastern philosophy or something, but it's like, you know, one moment of anger leads to 1,000 moments of regret, or something like that, you know. And it's again that thing because, you know, we've all done it, and hopefully not in too destructive a way. That's like you just react to something, and then later on you're like, man, that was awful. Like, why did I do that? Like, that was just not, you know, that was just not right, or it's not fair. I treated somebody not very well because of it. So it is very hard to do. It takes a lot of practice, but so worth it. So worth it.
What were some of the techniques that you learned that were particularly helpful for you along your journey?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think journaling really helps, you know, because for me, you know, I could write down like my train of thought, and I could write down what I was feeling. And again, that sort of helped sort of get it out of my head and just kind of just get a distance from it as well, like almost literally physically a distance from it where you can see it on the paper or on the screen in this case. So that was really, really helpful to write about it and process it. And it doesn't, you start to realize like, oh, these like thoughts and feelings aren't me necessarily. It might be like just old patterns or like old habits or just you know, from childhood, all the classic stuff. That's all the stuff, you know, the childhood stuff is fine. It's in there, you know. But yeah, and then I think honestly, like, you know, I wouldn't really call it meditation as such, but like, and it doesn't even sound like a technique, but it is literally simply like in very low stakes situations, basically just being aware of your thoughts and feelings. So, you know, the weather is like a great way to do it because there's always weather. There's never not weather. It's sunny, it's raining, it's cold, it's hot, it's sleet, it's snowing. That might be all in one day in England, by the way. That's
standard.
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, doing it, even just doing it on that, like noticing, let's say like you had plans to, you know, go for a picnic on the Saturday,
Yes.
and it's meant to be really bright and sunny, and they're like, oh, it sounds amazing, and then you wake up and it's pouring with rain. Like, taking that chance to be like, because it's a very low stakes situation ultimately. So you want to get to go on the picnic, whatever. Like, you know, we'll do something else. Or you can go on the picnic, I guess, and sit in the rain. That's up to you. That's up to you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. So, but it's like, what are my thoughts and feelings about that?
Yeah.
Do I feel angry? Do I feel sad? Are my thoughts like, oh, this is rubbish, or this shouldn't happen to me, or oh, this sucks, and like, oh, what am I going to do now? You know, what the woe is me type thoughts. And it's like, it's in low stakes situations, getting your practicing, just noticing that, being aware of that, and then being it might be hard to imagine, but you really do get to a point where it just becomes like this fascinating little show that's going on inside, and you're like, wow, do I feel like
where does that come from?
No, where's that come from? Well, like I weird thought about this, and I'm like, wow, that's really like kind of bizarre, but sort of entertaining, honestly, in a way.
Yes.
And so I think it's like the journaling does help, but then just simply like the meditation does help. I'm not like I don't meditate all the time, but sometimes I do. But just like, you know, just the awareness and low stakes situation of like what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, and you will start to kind of get distance from it if you practice that, and it will be when it's kind of a higher stakes situation, you know, difficult conversation at work, or a really difficult conversation at home, or like something, you know, I don't know, you crash your car, something like that. Then it's like, now I'm prepared. Now I've practiced, because I didn't wait until the moment to like do it, which is going to be much more difficult. But I practiced in a low stakes situation. Now I have. It's like basketball. You know, you practice when there's no defense or nobody around. You practice the shots, and when you're in the game, you know, it's you've got the muscle memory. It's really kind of that simple.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying look for opportunities in everyday life where it doesn't really matter in terms of the final outcome, but there are lots of opportunities like that in everyday life where you can learn to be more self-aware of the thoughts, the patterns that are going through, and then working through those on a consistent basis builds up to that big, heavy moment, and you're not just going off in that moment, right? Is that fair?
100%. That's exactly it. And like, just as an example, so I've been practicing this for a while, you know, and felt in a really good place about it. And then I won't go into all the details because it's a really long story, but basically, long story short, when I moved into my flat at the end of last year, I started within 5 weeks, I'd gotten 5 parking tickets for parking in my own space. In my own space, and I owed at this point, it was like 500 quid or something like that. And bearing in mind, I've just moved in. It's meant to be this time, you know, I'm meant to be really happy enjoying it. This all comes, and I'm like, my initial, I'm like, this is our, like, I couldn't believe this happened. Like, is this actually happening? Like, is this a really serious, like, and you know, the tickets weren't stopping coming. They just kept being more and more, and it was a really interesting situation emotionally, because I felt a lot of different emotions. I felt very sad at times, because I was like, I've just moved in, it's like, and now this is happening. I feel I just feel really sad. It just sucks, and it's just not fun at all. I felt very angry. I felt I was like prosecuted almost. I felt like it was unfair, and you know, I just felt, and it was just, you know, emotions that are sort of, you know, not as fun to kind of deal with, or kind of, you know, take a lot more processing and take a lot more acceptance of like, this is how I feel. But because I had practiced that, I was like, this is so interesting. I was like, this is how I'm really feeling about this. It's really strong. Like, I can feel really strong anger, like really like deep, like profound sadness as well. Like I really did like feel these things, and my thoughts were like, why is this happening to me? I'm gonna get him. Like, I'm gonna show him. Like, and I think it could have really like gotten me down and gotten me like angry to a point where I was like destructive, you know, and like being sort of maybe horrible to, or just not nice to the people around me. But because I'd done all this work, I was able to deal with this all. And it doesn't mean like I still talk to my girlfriend about it. I still talk to my parents about it and my friends, whatever. But I was able to deal with it really productively. I was even to the point where it's like they were not rescinding the tickets at first. I had to appeal. They didn't rescind any of them. I had to get, you know, my local MP involved. And BBC Watchdog involved.
No way.
Yeah. So it was, because it was like a countrywide
Yes.
problem that these basically these cowboy tickets.
Wow.
But I was able to do that and be that productive. And once those people get involved, all the tickets were rescinded like immediately.
Instantly, yeah. I don't want that smoke at all.
That smoke, exactly. They do.
They don't want it.
So, but yeah, I think, you know, it was a situation before in which it would have like completely, you know, gotten me down, and it would have affected my work life, my life. But like, if you like, you know, both my girlfriend and my parents said like they couldn't believe sort of how well I was dealing with it and how productive.
That's amazing.
It didn't affect anything at work. They didn't, you know, there was no like performance issues because this whole thing was going on in the background. And yeah, it was just simply, I was like, you know what, for whatever reason, this is happening to me. Like it just is. So I get people have been through worse things, right? There's a lot worse things than that. But at that time, it was happening to me. It was significant. And because I'd done all the low stakes practice when it came to this, and I'm thinking about earning all this money, and they're saying they're going to take me to court and bailiffs are going to come around and all this stuff. Like I was just able to just, you know, that was just what happened, and I had to deal with it, and I dealt with it.
And I think this is where you're right. There's definitely, like, in quotes, worse things that can happen to you, but the principle always stays the same, right? Whether it's a tiny thing or like, you know, a massive thing, the principles are always the same. And that way of positively processing is the only way I can describe it. It doesn't mean that you make it sound like everything's okay. No, it means you can absolutely look at it in the face and go, this is horrible. What can I do from my point of view to impact it in a positive way? And that's really what it's about. So like, you know, whether it's a tiny thing or a huge thing, the principles always scale up. They always remain the same, you know? So it's that might be your practice for the next thing that might be sucky as well, you know? So it's
exactly. It's not about saying, oh, this is like really cool and I'm really glad this is me. Like, you know, just don't, you know, at least, and who knows, you might even be able to get to that place eventually with things, but like the initial place you're probably going to be is the acceptance, as you would say, of like, this sucks. I wish this wasn't happening to me. I wish it
is.
But it is the key there. This is the reality you're in. You can't, you know, if you want to ignore it, good luck to you. That's not gonna help.
It's not gonna work
with any. Exactly, it just doesn't. It might work for a little bit, but then it's gonna really get worse. So yeah, the principles scale up. You're exactly right.
So my thing in those situations is, I always try and be as polite as humanly possible, because what I don't want is when it then gets all escalated, people are getting the emails and the text messages and the phone calls where I've gone off on people. I'm like, I'm not actually helping myself in that whole situation.
Exactly. And that was honestly, you're exactly right. And that was the other thing I thought. I was like, because I basically said, I was like, if needs be, I'm prepared to go to court about this, because it is my space. I'm in the right. I know I'm in the right. So be it. If that's what happens, so be it. So again, I was always in all the emails. I was like, oh, hey, you know, hope you're well. Like, you know, looking into this. Thanks. You know, again, I didn't have anything on me. And I was like, I'm not going to, and again, but if you let your emotions and thoughts get the best of you, you send that. I mean, an email or a text is arguably the worst, because then it's
the worst.
Yeah, the screenshot. Someone's going to say, hey, look, you said this. And you're like, oh my God. Like, so yeah, again, I kind of having really is kind of beginning to like have a mastery of yourself, right? A mastery of 100% your thoughts. And, you know, if there's anything worth mastering, it's that. There's no downside to it. there's no doubt.
You'll never escape yourself either. So you're always going to be with you. So you better master that. Everything else.
Yeah, you're the only one in there. There's nobody else.
Exactly.
You better
it's just you.
Get hold of it. Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of this podcast is really about. From a, you know, we all have different definitions of leaders. You know, someone might see like a CEO as a leader, but for us, it's like everybody leads themselves first. You know, so this is really about like everybody can master themselves. Everybody can lead themselves. So it doesn't matter if you don't have direct reports or anything like that. It's like, how are you leading yourself, right? Because emotional intelligence is like, do I understand myself? Can I actually intelligently manage myself? And then everything else flows from that.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's really difficult to be happy, honestly, if you don't have like some I'm not saying you have to be like, you know,
a Zen master of it,
Zen master, or like spiritual guru or something like that.
You
don't have some level of like mastery over yourself, or at least kind of, you know, you're working towards it to understand yourself a bit more. Like you said, you're gonna start by leading yourself. Like a lot of us do focus, and I've been completely that way in the past, where it's like I want to be a leader, or like I want leadership, or I want this or that, and then without ever like thinking about like, do you lead yourself? How well do you lead yourself? What kind of leader are you being to yourself? How do you treat yourself? Like it's this very kind of tempting thing to look outside to do, rather than to look inside and be like, actually, how do I deal with my inner self? How do I deal with my emotions, my thoughts? What kind of habits do I have? What kind of patterns do I have? So I think you're exactly right. And it's like, I think it was Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci, who, bearing in mind, was like I can't remember even the word now, but it's like, it's like a polymath or something, where he's like really good at a number of different things. He was an artist, he was a painter, he was a thinker, he was a sculptor. I think he designed the helicopter, like just like a million different things. And he was the one who said like self-mastery is like the most important mastery. Bearing in mind he was like
he's mastered a lot of things.
Genius, or like seemingly. So even he said that. So I just think it's crucial. If you're going to start anywhere, start with that.
100%. And just to talk about what you said about writing it down.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard about there's this book by Alison Fallon. And we'll put the link in the show notes. But it's called The Power of Writing It Down.
Oh no.
And she talks about how if you spend 20 minutes every day for like a week or something like that, it's not even like for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
She talks about how there are actually sometimes like physiological benefits to just writing things down for 20 minutes. And she was talking about how they did this study on a group of people, I think it was in the US, who got made redundant from like they'd been in this job for a long time. And they took half the people and sat them down and said, look, write down how you're feeling, process it through for a period of time. The other half, they didn't do any of that. And they said that the half who had processed through writing were way more successful in getting jobs, because they're not turning up to their job interviews like super angry, like these people screwed me over, etc., etc. They've processed it all through. So when they go for job interviews, they're way better. They perform so much better just from writing stuff down for like 20 minutes a day.
God, that's incredible, isn't it? Oh my God, it's like, it's one thing for like me to say, or someone to be like, oh, you should journal about your feelings, and stuff like
have
like a sort of scientific experiment done where it's like, no, this is actually, as you said, like physiological benefits. And again, perfect sort of at the moment with people who've been their jobs been made redundant, now they need a new one. It can be extremely stressful, extremely disheartening, these rejection emails, people ghosting, unfortunately, it's a really horrible thing. But that's amazing that there's like a real kind of, I might have to check that book out, that'd be great. Good shout.
I'll send you a link to the book. But it's a really, really interesting study that was done. So it has massive implications, because everybody has access to writing stuff down. Like you said with therapy, there are some people, like, you might not be able to afford therapy, but with writing it down, everybody can write stuff down. That one is I need to lead myself to write stuff down and take the time, do my discipline and do that. So it makes a massive difference.
Absolutely. Exactly. All that really requires is the willingness to do it, right? And it's like, you can have that or not. And it's like, what excuse would you have, especially if you've been made redundant? It's like, look, you might as well try something.
Time. Try it out.
Yeah.
So what would you advise people, just as we close, on emotional intelligence, especially when it comes to the area of, firstly, being a recruiter or trying to find people to fill your roles, but also in terms of being a candidate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm just going to plug my laptop in because it's about to run out of battery. Very professional of me, I know. But in terms of emotional intelligence, I would, again, it's like, from the perspective of a candidate, and I do try to write about this again in a way that kind of meets people where they're at. But you also, as a candidate, have to meet the company where they're at, right? The hiring manager where they're at, the recruiter where they're at. And what that means is, I read a cover letter, for example, the other day, where it was like, they were talking about, this will be a great opportunity for me to use, to develop my skills in XYZ. And I was like, cool. Like and it probably would be, but like,
Yeah.
you know, why would somebody hire you on the back? Like, so what? Like, and
Yeah.
I'm being deliberately kind of a bit harsh there, and it's like, because it's like you've got to understand that someone, you know, it's the hiring manager needs someone to do a specific
Yeah.
job,
I'm
and
hiring you to bring value. That's what I'm
I'm
hiring
hiring
you
you
for.
for your value, and I'm paying you
Yeah.
for that value. I'm paying you for your skills, what you can bring to the role. So yes,
Yeah.
it probably would be a great opportunity for you. Why would it be a great opportunity for the company to hire
Yeah.
you? What is it
Yeah.
that you can bring to
Yeah.
the company, to the role? And I see, you know, and I get a lot of people reach out to me on LinkedIn, like, you know, sending me messages, sending me all sorts of stuff, and you know, a sort of surprising amount, or maybe not surprising, but a surprising amount are, you know, very themselves focused. And
Yes.
again, if I'm meeting people where they're at, I get it. First of all, they haven't been trained in terms of, or
Exactly.
coached, whatever, how to kind of reach out to people, and I do
Exactly.
understand that. And that again in itself is a skill. But it's also like, you know, and probably like some of them are desperate, right? So they're just like, I'm just going to send message anyone who connects. I'm going to send a message. I'm just going to say, hey, this, I need a job, blah blah blah. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I do get that. The reason it won't be effective is because you're kind of making it all about you rather
Yeah.
than like, how can I help this recruiter fill his role? How can I help this hiring manager fill her role? How can I help
Yeah.
the company?
Yeah.
How can I bring value to the company in this way?
Exactly.
They're asking for these things. I have, you don't have to have all the things, that's fine, don't worry about it. But I have a lot of these things, and I know I could do this role. So your CV, your application, any of your outreach messages, they've got to show that. They've got to
Yeah.
demonstrate that. So
Yeah.
again, you as a candidate, use your emotional intelligence to have
Yeah.
empathy for
Mm.
a recruiter. I know I'm
For
asking a lot there, but have empathy for the hiring manager, for the company, for the recruiter, and
yeah.
apply in that way. So again, it's like putting yourself really in their shoes. What is a recruiter going to be looking for? What is a hiring manager going to be looking for? Which, you know, is one reason why. And this is kind of very detailed, but like I advise people, even just do like a summary at the top of your CV, because oftentimes, again, like it or not, oftentimes they might only just read that, and I, as a
Yeah.
candidate, want the recruiter to just read that and be
Yeah.
like, and even if they read nothing else, be like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're probably good for it. You
Yeah.
know, it's like,
Make
or
it as easy as possible for them.
yeah, like you know, it is really that simple. And I get that people be like, oh, but you know, and it just might be a shift in mindset for some people, I suppose, is really about it. It's like a shift
I,
from like, I want a job, to how can I show this company that this is the, you know, that I'm the right person for this job. I would say that's kind of the mindset shift.
what do you think of the blockers to shifting that mindset?
Yeah, great question. I think, you know, again, sort of as we've touched upon, like if you're kind of in a bit of like survival mode and a bit of desperation and kind of really feeling disheartened about the job search, it's like it's very easy to
Yeah.
act on those emotions rather than kind of a bit more like
Yeah.
putting yourself into someone else's shoes and thinking about
Yeah.
what do they want. So again, I think a blocker is like not the fact they don't have emotional intelligence or awareness, but it's sort of probably people letting their emotions get the best of them a little bit, which we all do a lot of the times.
Yeah.
I think sometimes as well, there's like a, you know, in some people it will be, well, you know, it I think it will just simply be the fact that they're very willing to do that, but they just don't have the skills. They haven't been trained
Yes.
or
They
coached
haven't
in
been
terms
trained.
of how to like properly reach out to people, and like, because people always talk about networking, right? And it's like, but how? Like, what do
What
I
does that mean?
do?
Like, how do I do that?
Message someone, hey, like, how's it going? And it's like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I get that it's really difficult, and I've actually got some posts coming out about that in terms of
That's
like
good.
how to reach out to people, because you know, at the moment, like cold applying to roles is going to be very difficult, unfortunately. So like, it's really tough. Like how to reach out to people, how to get people to refer you, how to get the
Yeah.
attention of hiring managers, recruiters, people like me, whatever. So yeah, I think those are, yeah, probably those are the you know, either the kind of they're getting caught up in their emotions, which again is totally understandable, and also just they haven't been trained or coached to do it properly.
I think I think those posts will be really, really useful for people. So I will put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes so that people can follow you, they can keep track of your posts, and the posts are really, really helpful from both sides of things. So
Thank you, man.
thank you so much for your time and sharing your thoughts. It's been really good, really fascinating, really good to hear your journey. And yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, my man. It was really, really good to chat. Really enjoyed this. Let's do it again when you're famous. I'm still gonna.
I think you're the one that's closer to famous than me, Ray. So,
Well, when we're both there, we'll do
yeah,
another. Yeah,
we'll do a heavy hitters podcast
yeah,
when we're both there. But honestly, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you guys so much for listening. And we'll catch you on the next episode.